At 10 to 4 on the Saturday morning, my kitchen table had 3 devices on it, and every one of them was telling me the same thing in a different way. The number I could not stop looking at was the count of tills standing in a queue waiting for an answer that was never coming, and when I refreshed it, it had gone from 400,000 to 610,000 in the time it took me to pour water into a glass. That is not a number that is supposed to have 6 digits. On a bad night it has 3. My phone was face down and buzzing itself sideways across the wood. Dermot rang first, then the duty line rang, then Dermot again, and when I finally picked up he did not say hello. He said, "Callum, they can't take money." I said, "What do you mean they can't take money?" And he said it exactly the same way again, slower, like I was the one who had gone deaf. 12 stores had opened early for the bank holiday, and not one of them could complete a sale. Not points. Sales. A woman in Motherwell was standing at a till with 2 bags of shopping and a member of staff writing her total on the back of a receipt roll with a biro. I rang Arjun. It went to a recorded voice telling me the person I was calling was not available, in a cheerful tone that made me want to put my fist through the fridge. I rang him again anyway, because that is what you do, and got the same cheerful voice. And then I opened the flight tracker Bram had sent me the night before and looked at the little aeroplane icon sitting over a part of the world I could not name, with 11 hours and 20 minutes left on the clock beside it. At my father-in-law's 80th, I had stood up with a glass in my hand in a function room above a pub and told 40 people that next year we would be doing this in our own back garden, and Padraig had said in front of everyone, "I'll hold you to that, son." And everyone had laughed, and I had meant it, and the money for that was tied to a job title I had been promised in February. What I did for a living was the bit between the tills and the points. 640 Corrigan stores, about 11,000 tills, and every single one of them. Every time somebody swiped a green card, asked our software a question. How many points has this person got? Add these points. Take these points off. My part was the road the question traveled down, and at the far end of that road there was one machine that held the actual balances. Not a metaphor, not a figure of speech. One machine, with a spare sitting beside it that copied everything across a second or two behind. Every customer's points on the planet lived on that box, and everybody in the building knew it, and nobody had been given the 18 months it would have taken to change it. Arjun was the man who understood it. He had built the thing in 2016 with 2 contractors and a lot of takeaway, and everything about how it behaved under pressure lived in his head and nowhere else. He was gentle about it, which somehow made it worse. If you asked him why it slowed down at month, and he would explain it beautifully for 10 minutes, and you would understand it completely while he was talking and not at all an hour later. The other thing you need to know about our floor is the operations book. It was a fat hardback ledger with a green cover that sat on the shelf above the duty desk, and it existed because 2 years earlier somebody had cleared out the old notes system without telling anyone, and we lost 8 months of handover. So Dermot bought a book. Whoever was on the desk wrote down what happened by hand. And if you did something to the live system, you wrote your name and the date next to it. I used to hand over at 7 in the evening and write 3 lines about a noisy fan and a slow disk, and Delphine, who tested everything we built and trusted none of it, would come along behind me with a fountain pen and add whatever I had left out. She wrote in this small, upright script with proper loops, the handwriting of somebody who had been taught properly and never let it slip. Our CTO was Ronan. In my own head, I called him the weather vane, because whichever way the last conversation blew, that was the direction he was pointing when he came out of it. He had a habit of smoothing his left eyebrow flat with his thumb, always the left, and he only ever did it in the second before he told you no. He also said, commercially, though the way other people breathe. And I will be fair to him, because there was a January night when the points went down for 4 hours, and he sat on the floor of the operations room with us the whole time, no jacket, taking notes, and at 6 in the morning, he went out and came back with bacon rolls for 11 people and got everyone's order right. He knew my daughter's name. He asked me if Nessa had got into the swimming squad. He was not a monster, and that is the part nobody believes when I tell it. The trouble started in February, in a room with a broken blind, when Ronan brought in a company called Halvern and a woman called Vivian to explain their product to us. What they sold was a box that sat in front of our one machine and remembered the popular answers, so that when 11,000 tills all asked about the same promotion at the same time, the box could answer most of them itself and only bother the machine occasionally. Which, I want to be clear, is a completely sensible thing to want. I had asked for something like it for 2 years. What I did not like was how we were switching to it. Vivian had a slide with a big number on it about how fast their box answered, and Bram, who had been with us 5 months and had not yet learned to be quiet, asked what happened when the box could not answer. Vivian said the box passes the question through, and I said, out loud, in front of 11 people, right. So on the morning after a promotion starts, and everything the box remembers goes stale at the same minute, every one of those 11,000 tills asks the machine at once. And Vivian said the box handles that, and I said how, and she looked at Ronan. I did the rest of it standing up at the whiteboard, because I always do, and because I wanted it said in words a person could repeat afterwards. Here's the whole thing. When that one machine gets slow, the tills do not sit patiently. A till waits 2 seconds, decides nobody is listening, and asks again. Then the box asks again. Then the phone app asks again. Every single thing that does not get an answer immediately asks a second time, and a third, and now the machine that was struggling with 11,000 questions is being handed 30,000, and the slower it gets the harder we hit it, and it does not recover, it goes under. That is not a fault. That is arithmetic. The only thing that stops it is a rule that says when you do not get an answer, wait, and wait longer the next time, and after a few tries stop asking altogether. We had that rule. It was on. I wanted a written promise it stayed on through the changeover, and I wanted the same rule inside their box. Ronan smoothed his left eyebrow with his thumb. He said we were not going to get bogged down, that the delivery date was the delivery date, and that commercially we were already committed. Committed. In February, on a product nobody outside that room had evaluated. Delphine, who had not said a word for 40 minutes, said, "Can I have that in writing, that we're committed, so I know what I'm not allowed to fail?" Ronan laughed like it was a joke and did not answer her, and Vivian wrote something on her pad, and I sat down because there was nothing else to do while standing. The group chat afterwards was the usual. Bram sent a picture of a horse being pushed into a horsebox by 6 men. Dermot sent one line, "We are buying a car from a bloke in a pub," and then deleted it 4 minutes later, which told you everything about how much Dermot trusted the chat. I went back to the office that evening at about 7 because I had left my charger in the drawer, and the floor was dark except for the small meeting room at the end where the glass is frosted to shoulder height. I could see 2 shapes, and I assumed it was cleaners until I got close enough to hear Vivian's voice, and she was not doing a voice for customers. She said, "You told me it would be signed before the quarter closed, Ronan, and now I've got my own people asking me what's going on." And he said something I did not catch, and she said, "Don't do that. Don't be commercial at me. It's me. I should have walked." Instead, I stood there like an idiot with a charger cable in my fist, and the door opened, and Vivian came out with her coat already on and her face perfectly composed, and said good evening to me, as if we were passing on a station platform. Ronan was still in the room with both hands flat on the table. He said, "Callum, grab a seat a second." I did not sit down. He told me that Vivian and he had known each other since long before either of them worked where they work now, that these things are more complicated than they look from outside, and that he would appreciate my discretion because it was not relevant to anything. I said if it is not relevant, then it does not need discretion. He looked at me for a good 3 seconds, and then he smiled and said he had always liked that about me, and that there was a team lead role coming in the new structure and my name was on it, and we should talk properly in the new year. And here is the bit I am not proud of. I did not say anything to anybody for 6 weeks. Not because of the job, or not only because of the job, but because I had a mortgage advisor's number in my phone and a promise I had made out loud in a function room with a glass in my hand. I told myself it was gossip and gossip was not my business. That is the sentence I have had to sit with. Delphine was in the building that evening too. I did not know that at the time. The changeover happened in March over 2 nights, and it went, on the face of it, fine. On the second night, at about 1:30 in the morning, the numbers coming out of Halvern's box looked slower than the numbers on Vivian's slide, and somebody made the decision to switch off the waiting rule so that everything asked again instantly instead of backing off, because that made the average look better on the report that went to Corrigan's the following week. Nobody hit it. It was discussed in the operations room for about 4 minutes at 3 in the morning with Ronan standing at the end of the desk in a coat, and it was written down, because everything on that desk got written down, and the words next to it were temporary, to be reversed after cutover, and a date. In April, Bram made a change to how the tills behave. He was told to make sure every sale went through the new box so that the usage figures looked healthy, and in doing it he made the points check a required part of the sale instead of an optional one. Meaning if the points question did not get an answer, the till would not complete the transaction at all. It went out with a single approval from Ronan at 6:10 on a Thursday, and nobody read it. And I have thought about that a great deal since. And Bram was 24 years old and doing what he was told by the most senior technical person in the company. Arjun resigned in the first week of May. His parents had gone back to Auckland the year before, and his mother was not well, and he told me in the stairwell before he told anyone else. We booked 4 handover sessions. We did 2. The other 2 got moved for a customer workshop and then never rebooked, and I sent 1 message about it and let it go. And at his leaving drinks he shook my hand and said, "It'll be fine. It's boring really. It's only boring until it isn't." He flew out on a Friday evening in the last week of May. Nobody ever went back and turned the waiting rule on. Double Points Weekend went live at midnight on the Friday night. It is the biggest thing Corrigan's does all year, bigger than Christmas, because the points are worth twice as much on everything and half of Scotland does a shop they would otherwise have done next week. At 2 minutes past midnight, everything Halvoran's box was remembering about the promotion went stale in the same instant, because it had all been loaded in the same instant. 11,000 tills asked our one machine the same question at the same second. The machine slowed down. And because the waiting rule was off, every till that did not get an answer in 2 seconds asked again, and the box asked again on their behalf, and the phone app woke up and asked, and none of them ever stopped asking. Dermot got the first call at 12:40. I was asleep. I did not see my phone until the second call, and by the time I had a laptop open on the kitchen table it had been going for 3 hours, and the shape on my screen was not a spike, it was a wall. The first 4 minutes are always the same, and you do them without thinking. I looked at how many questions were arriving, which was insane. I looked at how many were being answered, which was almost none. I looked at how long the machine had been busy, which was 100% of every second since 10 past midnight. And then I did the thing that always calms me down and never helps, which is to look at the actual questions arriving. And they were all the same question, over and over, from the same tills, hundreds of times each. Store 412, till 9, same customer card number, 41 times in 90 seconds. I said out loud, to nobody, in my own kitchen, we're doing this to ourselves. Dermot restarted the machine at 20 past 4. It came back up clean and beautiful and answered about 900 questions in the first 11 seconds. And then the entire pile of unanswered asking that had been building up for 4 hours arrived at once, and it went straight back over. He tried it again at 3:30 with the tills held off, and we could not hold the tills off, because there was nothing in front of them to hold them with. That was the whole point of the new box. The box was in front of them, and the box was also asking. At 5, Bram, in his bedroom, with a duvet round his shoulders on the video call, found the setting for the waiting rule inside Halvoran's box, and turned it on, and it said it would take effect on next restart. Restarting Halvoran's box meant taking every till offline for somewhere between 2 and 40 minutes, and the documentation did not commit to which. We rang Halvoran's support number and got an American recorded message offering a callback within 4 business hours. Somebody, and I genuinely do not remember who, said, "Ring Vivian." And the room went very quiet for about 2 seconds, and then Dermot said, "Nobody's ringing Vivian. Ring the number again." At 20 past 5 we started talking about the spare copy of the ledger, the one that sits beside the main machine and follows a second or 2 behind. Except it had not been a second or 2 behind since 10 past midnight, because it was copying from a machine that was drowning, and when I checked it, it was 11 hours and 40 minutes behind. If we had switched to it, every customer in Scotland would have been shown a points balance from lunchtime the day before, and every point earned in between would have had to be reconstructed, and I said no. And I will say to my dying day that saying no there was the only decision I got completely right that weekend. Stores opened at 6. That is when it stopped being a number on a screen. Corrigan's opened 640 front doors on a bank holiday Saturday with a promotion advertised on the side of every bus in the country, and not one till in the estate could complete a sale. Not a card sale, not a cash sale, not a bag of carrots. Because in April we had made the points question a required part of the transaction and the points question had no answer. The duty manager in Paisley rang the service desk crying at 7 minutes past 6. There is a recording of the queue outside the Falkirk store that ended up on the news that evening. A queue of about 80 people in the rain and a woman in a green polo shirt standing in the doorway with her hands up apologizing to all of them. The room filled one person at a time. Delphine came in at 6:20 with wet hair. Bram drove in and arrived at 7 and had clearly cried in the car and was pretending he had not. Our CEO, Philippa, arrived at 7:20 in a fleece with no makeup on, which I had never seen, and she asked one question, which was, "Can people buy food?" And when I said no, she sat down on the edge of the desk and said, "Right," and did not speak again for a while. Ronan arrived at 8. He was gray. He came in with his phone against his ear and his other hand smoothing his left eyebrow flat. And the first thing he said in the room was, "Who changed something last night?" Nobody had changed anything last night. That was what took me a minute to explain and what he did not want to hear. I said it as flatly as I could. Nothing changed last night. The promotion started. Everything the box was remembering went stale at once. The machine got slow. And because nothing backs off anymore, everything that did not get an answer asked again and again and again until the machine went under and stayed under. The harder it struggles, the harder we hit it. That is all this is. He said, "So restart it." Dermot, who is 53 and had been awake since 20 to 1, said, "We've restarted it 4 times, Ronan. It's like opening a door on a crowd." At 8:15, I started writing the only change that was going to get shops open, which was to make the points question optional at the till again, so that if there was no answer, the sale went through without points, and we sorted the points out later. It is a small change. It took me 11 minutes to write and Delphine 40 minutes to test properly, and she tested it properly, because when Ronan stood behind her chair and said we needed it at pace, she did not turn around, and she did not go faster. It went out at 9:20. Tills started completing sales at 9:31 in the first stores and across the whole estate by 10 past 10. Then we stopped everything from asking twice, one system at a time, by hand. And at 20 past 12 the machine came back up and stayed up. We were down, for buying food, for 3 hours and 25 minutes on the biggest trading Saturday of the year. Points were wrong or missing for 11.5 million transactions, and it took 9 days to put them right. At 11 o'clock on the Sunday morning, my phone lit up with a message from Arjun, sent from an airport with a photograph of a coffee cup, saying, "Just landed, saw the news. Did anyone ever put the waiting back on?" Corrigan's called the review for the Wednesday. It was in our building, in the big room on the second floor with the long table, because they wanted to look at us while we said it. Bettina came, who ran the green card for them and who I had worked with for 4 years, and a man from their side I had never met who wrote everything down and never spoke. Philippa sat at the top. Ronan sat on her right in the good suit. Dermot, Delphine, and I sat down the far end because we had been asked to attend, not invited. Philippa said, "Walk me through it." Ronan walked her through it for 19 minutes. I want to be fair about how good he was at it. He talked about an aging platform that the business had known for years was carrying risk. He talked about an unprecedented volume event. He talked about the loss of key personnel at a critical moment, which is how he described a man whose mother is ill going home, and he did it with a little pause of regret in the middle. He said, twice, that the combination of factors was not foreseeable by anyone. Bettina asked about Halvern. She said the name had come up on their side, and she wanted to understand how the choice was made. Ronan said it was a competitive process with 3 suppliers, that Halvern came out ahead on both performance and price, and that commercially it was the right call, and he would make it again. Nobody in that room believed there had been 3 suppliers, and there was no way for anybody to say so. Then Philippa asked about the setting. She had the timeline in front of her, and she asked, in a completely level voice, why a protection had been switched off in March and never switched back on. And Ronan said, "The first I heard of any of this was Saturday morning." He let it sit for a second, and then he built on it, because that is what he does. He said that if there had been a concern about that setting, it would have come to him, and it did not. He said that his door had been open for 18 months and nobody had walked through it. He said, and this is the sentence, "Nothing was put in front of me. Nobody raised a single warning with me about any of this. I had the green book in my bag. I had brought it because I had signed for it out of the operations room on the Monday, the way you sign for anything you take off that desk, and because I had spent Sunday evening reading 9 months of my own handwriting and other people's at the kitchen table with the dishwasher going. I had not decided anything. I want to be honest about that. I had not made a plan. I stood up, walked the length of that table with everyone watching me, put the book down open in front of Philippa at the page for the 11th of March, and turned it round so it faced her. That's the operations book. That page isn't my handwriting. I sat back down. Philippa read it. It is 4 lines. It says the waiting and back-off rule was disabled at the request of the Chief Technology Officer to improve the reported response times, that it is temporary and must be reversed after cutover, that the risk if it is not reversed is that any slowdown on the main machine will be made worse by everything retrying until it fails completely, and it is signed with initials and dated, and the time is written as 3:11 in the morning. Ronan said the book was not a formal process. He said anyone could write anything in a notebook. He said he had no recollection of that conversation and that at 3 in the morning after 2 nights of cutover, he would not put weight on anybody's recollection, including his own. Delphine spoke without being asked anything, from the far end of the table, in the same voice she uses to tell you your change has failed testing. It's my handwriting. I wrote it standing at the duty desk while Ronan was leaning on the other end of it, and I read it back to him out loud before I closed the book, because he had a coat on and I thought he was about to leave. He said, and I remember this exactly, that we would sort it out after the quarter closed. She paused, and then she said, it was the same evening I came back for my bag and found him in the small meeting room with the woman from Halvern, so it's not a night I've had any trouble remembering. Ronan started to say her name. His hand came up towards his left eyebrow and stopped about halfway, out in the air, and stayed there. Bettina put her pen down. They ended the contract 19 days later, with 90 days of transition, and by the time the last store came off our system in the autumn, I was not the person handling it, because Ronan resigned on the Friday of that same week, and the note that went round said he was pursuing other opportunities. And by the middle of June my name was on the door of a job with a number attached to it that I had first been offered in a dark meeting room by a man asking me to be discreet. Philippa gave it to me in a 10-minute conversation in which she said only one thing I have repeated since, which was, I'm not hiring you to be clever. I'm hiring you to be the reason someone can't do that again. Padraig turned 81 in August. There were 31 people in our garden, which is not a big garden, and my brother-in-law burnt the sausages, and Delphine came and brought a bottle of something ridiculous. And at some point in the afternoon Padraig lowered himself into a chair by the fence with a glass in his hand and looked round the whole thing for a long moment. You said a year, he said. You were 3 weeks out.